Westworld is HBO's intriguing sci-fi drama, and if you're not familiar with the show, the premise lands the viewer in a fully immersive premium theme park that is not for the kiddos. It's miles and miles of Wild West danger where anything goes, and I do mean anything. Let your imagination wander. Just like the proverbial white hat versus black hat, any visitor to the park must decide if they're going to play the role of the good guy or the bad guy. And unfortunately, many of these guests to the park pay their money to commit murderous violence, revel in debauchery, and worse, all without legal recourse. How do they do this? Well, you technically can't murder a robot, right? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the robots. They're robots. But in Westworld, they call them hosts. And they are fully capable of interacting with human guests. Now, what makes HBO's Westworld unique is that the protagonist in the show, the people we're rooting for, are not the guests in the park. They're not even the managers working behind the scenes in the park. No. The protagonists are the hosts themselves, the robots. But Westworld wasn't the first show to have robots as protagonists. No, one of my favorite TV shows, and pardon me while I geek out, one of the most critically acclaimed TV shows of the 21st century was the Reed-made Battlestar Galactica, starring Edward James Olmos and Mary McDonnell. See, Battlestar Galactica did something different with the Cylons in the remake. I forgot. The robots in this show are called Cylons in Battlestar Galactica. Try to keep up. So the Cylons look like these big, giant walking toasters, right? Except not all the Cylons look like that. Some Cylons look and act very human. And on top of that, a select few sleeper Cylons don't even actually know that they're not human. Throughout its 4 seasons on the Sci-Fi Channel, Battlestar Galactica kept asking audiences, what's the difference between Cylon and human? Can a Cylon, a robot, feel pain? Can a machine deceive? Can you technically murder a robot? I can't say enough about how fantastic Battlestar Galactica really was, but where that show introduced robots in a narrative that affected the humans just as much in the story, Westworld takes it a step further. See, the writers in Westworld introduce us to several built-in limitations on their robots, the host. Like they can't see things or hear things that their programmers don't want them to see or hear. They could literally be staring at a photo of Times Square and see nothing at all, because it doesn't fit within their Wild West narrative that they're programmed for.
Doesn't look like anything to me.
Another hindrance, and arguably the most significant, is that their memory is wiped every night. They keep no record of the previous day's events. They have no knowledge of their previous tragedies or victories or romantic encounters, and they have no idea of the previous days or even years they've spent in that park. Westworld squarely places the audience within the heads of the protagonist. That's what distinguishes it from Battlestar Galactica. The audience receives the story through the perspective of the machines, the hosts. The writers and directors force this perspective shift through a device called the Unreliable Narrator. You see, we take it as a given that we can trust whoever's narrating the story until we find out that they don't have all the bits and pieces of the story. I want to highlight a few scenes where the Unreliable Narrator is revealed, so be warned. Spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen season 1 of Westworld, go ahead and turn the video off now. But be sure to click subscribe. So, most of season 1 is just an exercise in trying to figure out what's going on in the story. About 3/4 of the way into the season, we realize that the writers and directors have been using a common cinematic device, the flashback, all along. But they've been using it wrong on purpose. See, in typical movies or TV shows, when a flashback is used, you get a haze effect or a distinct change in the color palette, some other kind of visual cue that tells you, hey, this is a flashback. But the directors left that out completely, because the hosts have been hindered by the creators from storing memories until they start to receive an update that lets memories creep in. And since the show doesn't distinguish between what's flashback and what's current, you're just as confused and shocked as the host to realize you've been watching 2 different timelines, events that are taking place 30 years apart. Another example of how the writers force the narrator's perspective onto the audience comes when, spoiler, A lead programmer is searching through an off-limits section of the park, and a coworker comments to him that they should try and investigate what's behind the door, and he replies by saying,
What door?
"What door?" He doesn't even see it. And the audience is struck with the revelation that this lead programmer is actually a robotic host and doesn't even know it. But what audiences miss in that scene is that they could not see the door either. Unreliable Narrator is a fun device for concealing and revealing revelations in a story. But when we examine our own lives, we have to admit that from time to time, we are the unreliable narrator. When was the last time you knew something was absolutely true until you realized it wasn't? Ever found out that someone you trusted for years was not worthy of that trust? And looking back, you begin to see all the signs that were right there in front of you, but you were previously blind to. And now they're so clear. We are the unreliable narrator. Each one of us. We live our lives thinking we're the center of our own story, and we act on things that we believe, and we believe because we know that we know that we know, until... In the past 10 years, I've been guilty of observing other people's stories of injustice and thinking, no, that doesn't happen. Not in this day and age. That doesn't really happen. And my unreliable narrator creeps up to say that I know, that I know, that I know. And friends and family in my life have been gracious enough to peel back the blinders on my eyes, and I stop and think, I'm a little better for it. Let me encourage you to look around your own little world with fresh eyes. Don't be afraid to call out your own unreliable narrator. And I hope that when a friend looks at you and says, let's walk through that door, that you'll be unafraid to ask, what door?